CityCast from Explocity.
Lena thinks she has been imagining it all as she walks towards his house. For some reason, she can't think of him by name. She sees his face swimming in her mind. "Stop it," she says aloud, tossing her hair from her face. "You are 38 years old, not a silly teenager to be mooning over a movie star." He opens the door even as she steps onto the gravel path leading to the cottage. She blinks. Has he been waiting for her? He smiles. "Hello. I thought you would come by yesterday in the evening," he says. I had to hold myself back. She wants to tell him. Give this, whatever seems to have sprung up between us, some semblance of sanity. Instead, she says carefully, "I suppose you're not used to being on your own." She sees how the stubble covering his scalp is a melange of black and white. It makes his face seem younger than ever. She has an irresistible urge to stroke his face and run the back of her palm over his head. He doesn't respond to her comment, but cocks his head and says, "You look nice." She blushes. She had washed her long hair the evening before, but the straight as rainwater hair had gone back to being a mass of curls. This morning, she'd pulled on a chiffon tunic in a deep aubergine instead of her habitual t-shirt. And then she hooked 2 silver hoops in her ears. "I'm dressing up for him," she told herself with a little flutter in her chest. "What am I doing? I'm a wife. I have a life."
The job of an advertising copywriter is never easy. They must be creative on demand, use the fewest possible words, and their writing must sell. These 3 disciplines of respecting deadlines, brevity, and wit, rather being entertaining, are wonderful attributes for any author. My guest today has these disciplines in buckets. She is author and friend Anita Nair. I first met Anita in the late 90s when she was a creative director in an advertising agency with a copywriting background, ergo these skills. I guess Anita wanted to write something a little longer than ad copy, and I was delighted to find a writer like Anita. So she started to write a column for the Bangalore Monthly titled The Economical Epicurean. Many years later, she told me that that was her first stab at writing about food. She walked in one day with a copy of her manuscript, her first book titled Satire of the Subway. Fair to say that I was not the only person who loved that book. It launched her literary career. Clearly, she would become a famous writer, not merely because of her writing skills, but because of the discipline that she brought to the craft. Not only does she write with the reliability of a workhorse, but her writing has always been well-researched, insightful, and downright solid. All that done and dusted, the real appeal of Anita's writing is romance. There's romance in the prose, there's romance in the narrative, there's poetry in the descriptions. And of course, there's romance, like, love. I wouldn't be surprised if one of her characters, who was doing nothing more than buying, say, cleansing supplies at the supermarket, found love lurking at the end of the aisle. To wit, Anita Nair is a romantic, or should I say romanticist, as is clear from the little passage that she read from her book in the beginning of this clip. So first things first, Anita Nair, I'm so happy to have you here on the Literary City.
Hey Ramjee, great to be here.
What you read for us was so romantic, which makes my first question very easy. Tell me, are you really Barbara Cartland?
There's a friend of mine who likes to tease me about this because my study is pink. And he would constantly say that, I'm heading that way. I'm going to be writing Bodice rippers. But that was when I built the house 18 years ago. And it's fine. I'm still Anita, not, not Barbara Cartland yet.
Now, that comes as something of a relief. But growing up, did you read a lot of Barbara Cartland?
I did.
And did romance novels mean something to you?
Actually, yes, because I think, when I was growing up, the romance novels that I read were the Mills and Boons that came out at that point.
I remember Mills and Boon was a big deal, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The Mills and Boon was like the go-to book. Everybody read it, and we were all kind of imagining this tall, dark, handsome man without realizing that, we are Indians, and that whole the whole context of tall, dark, and handsome meant something else in the Western world.
I don't believe you. I was tall, I was dark. 2 out of 3 isn't so bad, is it?
And then there was this Georgette Heyer. There was Barbara Cartland, of course, but I somehow preferred reading Georgette Heyer because there was more material in it in terms of, whether it was descriptions or whether it was even in terms of the complexity of relationships. And the same went with Mills and Boon. Not so much Barbara Cartland because I was tired of reading about 18-year-old heroines with 16-inch waists and names like Anastasia. But literary point of view, I think the Mills and Boon series were excellent because one, it showed you as a writer, later I would think about it, it showed you how to create characters.
What about male romanticists? Same period would be someone like Harold Robbins?
Harold Robbins, he was one of the finest character creators.
Quite definitely. All right, what was the first book you read that made an impact on you? What book was it, and how old were you when you read it?
At the age of 8, I found this brilliant book called Serpent of Paradise by Miguel Serrano, who I later discovered was a very hardcore Nazi sympathizer. He's actually a Chilean writer. But the book, Serpent of Paradise, is pretty much like an Indian pilgrimage. So for me, stuck in the middle of a tiny little army camp town in Chennai, this was like opening my eyes to the rest of the country, because so I was reading about things, and I don't remember any of the esoteric parts of it, but what I do remember is descriptions of Rishikesh and reading descriptions of the various pilgrim points that he goes to. So that for me was very interesting. And I think also there was something, probably it was a translation. I don't know if it was written originally in English, but there was something about it that was very far away from everything else I was reading at that point, which was primarily Enid Blyton and, Richmal Compton and people like that.
There have been accounts of Nazis and Nazi sympathizers running around India in search of the spiritual, but at the tender age of 8, what would you have known about all of that?
The Serpent of Paradise, of course, was about the Kundalini and that kind of thing, So none of what I was reading made any sense to me, but I kept reading. It was like I was sucked into something and I was, exploring it without knowing what I was exploring. It was probably my version of Alice in Wonderland.
Alice, going down that rabbit hole must have been fun. But that's the way I feel about many of the early romance writers like Cartland and Robbins. They were, pardon the pun, seminal in their work. But the one thing that each of them had was craft, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
So what inspired you to become literary? Uncles, other ancestors?
Not really. I come from a very non-literary family, very non-literary. They painted, all of them were artists. But probably I think what I loved about that world that I was part of was the attention to detail. And that for me was something that became a part of who I am, not just in my writing, but in everything that I do. So that came, I think, from watching these men paint, the way they would be like working on one tiny part of the canvas or whatever they were doing.
Well, there you go. That's the answer. That's where you got your attention to detail.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And creativity. I mean, what could be more creative than taking a piece of white canvas and turning it into an abstraction that no one can understand? What else about writing do you believe to be craft?
So I think one, of course, is that to be able to um, be succinct, because what you find is that a lot of people, they ramble. And also I think that craft is also about learning to cut out the self-indulgence. When I write my first draft, I'm very reluctant to show it to anybody because I'm at my self-indulgent worst. And then when I start getting down into the second draft is when I'm ruthless. I just cut out everything. And I say that, no, I mean, if I were to read this, I would barf.
Well, judging oneself is necessary, I guess. So is judging others. Have you ever been a book reviewer, a literary critic?
Oh, yes, I have. In fact, I started reviewing books for India Today, literary pages. And I stopped reviewing after a while. I think the literary establishment in India is so tiny that it's very incestuous. So today I could be reviewing somebody's book, and if I don't give them a good review, then 3 years down the line, it will be their turn to review my book, and it would be torn apart.
You mean in an obvious sort of way?
It's just kind of so blatantly obvious. I discovered it the hard way.
Was that the only reason you stopped reviewing books?
The other thing, of course, is that, that magazines would send me books to review, which were especially first-time authors. And I was beginning to feel like I was this great annihilator of dreams.
Annihilator of Dreams? Sounds like the title of your next book. You do go on. You said you would receive first-time authors' books and
I had this very, very solid reasoning for it. If you look at the cost of a book in India, a good novel, say about 300, 250 pages, it costs anything from 400 rupees to 800 rupees. Now, it's not like as if people are going to, set aside their weekly shopping and buy a book instead. So when they buy a book, there's a lot of thought attached to it. Should I buy this book? So as a reviewer, I thought it was my honest duty to direct them towards good books. Because if I were to give a mediocre book a great review, a good book would suffer. So I thought that, I was kind of upholding what it means to be a literary critic. And then I realized that what I was doing was just getting everybody's back up, at which point I exited the reviewing firmament.
But that begs the question, how did mediocre books get there in the first place? Where are the gatekeepers? Are we setting up an ecosystem that condones mediocrity?
Yes, absolutely.
Why? Business reasons?
Yeah, for business reasons, commercial reasons, reasons like, probably somebody knows somebody, nepotism, all of that. Everything comes into play.
Well, more honest criticism would be great, wouldn't it? But then that presumes craft and knowledge. How do you win this? I love sarcastic literary criticism. I remember this one from the famous author Damon Runyon about a book you mentioned earlier, Alice in Wonderland. His review read, "A pack of lies." And this one that has been attributed, some say falsely, to Dorothy Parker And it went something like this. It was about a sports book, and she wrote, "This is not a book to be tossed aside lightly. It should be hurled with great force."
Well, there was somebody who read one of my books and said that as well.
Said what? The same thing? Are you for real? Which book?
I think this was Lessons in Forgetting.
Lessons in Forgetting? What irony. But what's the story?
This was on a social media handle, and there was this lady. She's a writer. I'm not going to take up names. She had, I think read the book. And then she said, after reading Anita Nair's Lessons in Forgetting, I'm inclined to quote Dorothy Parker. And then she put this quote.
Anita, honestly, I had no idea about this. I wasn't trying to sneak it in.
No, I haven't.
You are the bigger woman for laughing about it, but tell me truthfully, does it hurt?
I never get ruffled by bad reviews. Yes, the first day when I read it, for the first few hours, I'm like in agony. And it's like, my baby, how dare they tear it apart and those kind of things. But usually within about 24 to 48 hours, I'm able to laugh about it. So,
well, you're human. You're a romantic, not robotic. Speaking of which, you a Jane Austen fan?
Oh, I love Jane Austen. For me, the most poignant moment was and I went to see her house in England. There was this door which was never oiled. Hinges would make a sound, so that when somebody was coming in, she would know, and they wouldn't catch her writing. Yeah, I never forget that. But I like her. I like her writing very much.
Not so much this woman that gave her a 1-star review on Amazon for Pride and Prejudice. Her review went like this. This is her summary of this classic book. Just a bunch of people going to each other's houses.
Well, yeah, not all readers are intelligent readers.
Ooh, that was cutting. Well, I was at the receiving end of such cutting from you many years ago. This was a sentence that you had written that had a comma in it. I thought it shouldn't have a comma in it. You thought it should, and you won.
Wow, Ramjee. It's kind of, I've forgotten. You have to remind me about it sometime.
Remind you? To me, that was a lesson in forgetting, shall we say. But I'll grant, commas are important.
No, I'm a little, not a little, I'm a very serious grammar Nazi.
Speaking of grammar, you stopped reviewing books, but you do teach people how to write. Don't you have some kind of a teaching/mentoring program?
Yeah, so it's called Anita's Attic. And I take on about 12 writers every year and work with them, on a living project, which could be a book that they want to write or a book that they're working on halfway through and so on. I take them through the entire process that I put myself through and kind of work with them on everything, right from crafting to ideation and structure and everything.
And how does one climb the stairs to get to Anita's Attic?
Attic, you have to apply, and there is there's an entrance test.
What's your yardstick for admission? How does one fail this test?
Well, the first thing, of course, is if a person can't write a grammatical sentence in English, they are out. Even if they're the most brilliant thinkers, I can't work with them because the language I'm working with them is English, and that's the language that they need to know.
And what's strike two?
And then I look at the extent of the imagination to see how this person is also. So it's just a 400-word assignment, So within 400, and I give them an opening line, and then tell them fly with it, do what you can with it. So it could be anything. It could be sometimes a story, it could be a poem, it could be an essay.
Give me an example of an opening line.
One of my favorite opening lines of my own work is, on the day I killed myself, it was clear and bright. It was a Monday, a working day.
Oh, chilling. Makes you want to read the second line. So if you're an aspiring writer and you can write a grammatical sentence and have some imagination, you might be on the road to being mentored by Anita Nair. There's a link in the description of the podcast. Just go there, click it, be on your way. Now, before we go, Anita, you said something else bugs you about people that write to you. Either they're talking about books that they've written or they want to join Anita's Attic. And what upsets you is that they write mails in what? SMS language?
I keep getting these mails from people telling me that I've written a book. And what appalls me is that they use SMS language. This is a person claiming to be a writer, a person claiming to love literature. And I just look at it and I'm like, oh man, get a life, first. Get your language in place and then we'll think about it.
Your language, not spelled you are.
Yeah. Can, C-N, can I have HB? Oh gosh, since this is a public podcast, I'm not using the expletives that come into my mouth. And I like rolling at the tip of my tongue.
Don't deny us an Anita Nair curse word.
No.
With or without expletives, Anita Nair, it was such fun having you on the Literary City.
Thank you, Ramjee. It was really great fun to talk about things without censoring myself, because I do that a lot. And it was nice to just, let fly.
And now it's time for that fun segment, What's That Word? And to help me with it is my co-host and a master of the silent laugh. As usual, I'll let her introduce herself. Have at it, Pink Floyd.
Hi, my name is Praniti, but you can call me P. That's P with an A, not another E.
Okay, P with an A. What's the word?
The word today is seminal.
Seminal? Why?
Well, in your interview with Anita Nair, while referring to Barbara Cartland and Harold Robbins, you called them romanticists who are seminal.
Yes.
And then said, pardon the pun. What's the pun?
Okay. I'm not sure how far back I have to go to start answering that question. So what do you understand of my phrase, they are seminal writers?
Well, I understand that they are pioneers in that genre.
Yes, and that is one of the dictionary definitions of the word seminal. It's an adjective, and there are 5 definitions. Let me just read them out to you from the dictionary, shall I?
Go ahead.
First, potentially capable of development. Okay?
Okay.
Goes to what you said. Number 2, highly original, influential, and important. Again, it goes to what you said. You said they were pioneering authors.
Okay.
Number 3, and this is the root of or relating to semen, like seminal fluid, male reproductive thing. And number 4, it's relating to seed, as in biology or better still, botany. And 5, it's rudimentary or unformed. Like there's another word in English called inchoate, which means yet to be born. The legal people use it a lot. Another day, another discussion. But let's head back to seminal. Shall I get into the etymology of it? What would you like me to do?
Yeah, let's get into the root of the word seed. Get it?
Yes, very funny. I got it instantly. Very funny indeed, but you were completely on point. Seminal's origins are Latin, and it starts with the PIE usage, which is se, which means seed.
What's PIE? Because I like my PIE apple. if you're taking orders.
Well, that's PIE with an A, I guess, that too. All right. PIE simply means Proto-Indo-European languages, PIE. It's a classification of world languages done by linguists and scholars and etymologists. I am none of those. I'm just a guy with Google.
And a podcast.
See who's laughing now. So anyway, say was a seed, and in due course of time, there is some kind of evidence of its usage in its synonyms. Between 1350 and the early 1400s, seed came to represent everything that was at beginnings. So in the literary sense, a thought or an idea which then spawned new thoughts and ideas based on that original thought or an idea came to be known as seminal. You've heard the dictionary definitions, and all of them have one thing in common. It has to do with something beginning somewhere, like life. And then it took on this whole corporeal sense. And seminal became something that was related to birth. So I guess it got related to semen. Now, to answer your second part of the question, why was it a pun, right? So the thing is that Harold Robbins was a great source of titillation for us. He had sex in his books. And
oh my.
Oh yeah. I don't know of any boy growing up in the 70s that didn't have a copy of Harold Robbins tucked away under his mattress or his bed. Better than Playboy. Well, there's some opinions on that. So my pun was intended to convey that these writers wrote about sex. So rather than saying that they were early romanticists who had sex in their work, I said that they were seminal writers, and that was a pun. It's a terrible pun. I apologize to the universe.
But what is this definition that's explicitly and exclusively linked to male biology?
I do agree with you. It's absolutely true. I don't think that all life began with a human male seed. So it is intractably male in its sense. There's another reason why the word seminal is overused. In a very strong literary room, you wouldn't want to use the word seminal. I looked at this blog written by a Ms. Bridget, all right, who claims to be a Ms. Whenever men want to write in a clever way, they take on female personas.
Uh-huh.
Now, you don't believe it. Okay, I just made that up. And Miss Bridget has this to say about the word seminal, and I quote, "It is a very college word, one that people tend to use to make themselves look fancy, like the word eponymous." Miss Bridget goes on to say, "Recently, I saw seminal used in a talk about Toni Morrison, and I winced. Semen seed, and the seminal Latin root is the root of the word seminal. So what's the big deal?" Now, using the word seminal to describe a literary work, you're referencing a Latin root that is grounded in male sexual reproduction. That is problematic because it implies that the origin of a work is male, regardless of who wrote it. All right, so that's it. So you're right. Miss Bridget is totally on your side.
Yeah, and that too to describe Toni Morrison, who's a feminist writer, if there ever was one.
I know, right? I mean, that is egregious. What my favorite is, when I was researching that word, I came across an overuse of the word by that bastion of journalism in English, the London Times.
Yeah.
And the Sunday edition is called the Sunday Times.
Yeah, those guys.
Oh, yeah, they can be all literary because they have the whole week to bring out the paper. Can I read out the usage of the word seminal?
Yeah, go ahead.
In 2007, the Sunday Times had this sentence: "For its succinct and sweeping history alone, the book is seminal." Now, if you take the origin of the word and the sentence, it made no sense. They were so happy with that word that they went on in the same year about a book saying, "It is a seminal book." All right. The music editor, not to be outdone, worked 2 years to find a way to include that word in his writing. And in 2009, he got it. And he wrote, "The Rockers are still at the top of their game 18 years after the release of their seminal debut album." All right. Now, I get it. I mean, I completely agree with you and Miss Bridget. All right. Here's another one. And this one irks me. So I'm going to read it out, although it makes me blush. It was a seminal moment in my adolescence.
Oh, that's funny.
No comment over there. As adolescents, we've had seminal moments, but not something that I would offer in an interview to the Sunday Times, all right? 2011, this is quite a seminal moment for us. 2014, think about the seminal moments in your career. Ooh, I think they have hashtags for that now. 2014, the first was purely intellectual and highly visible through a handful of seminal historical works. Now, if anything was historically relevant, it automatically should be seminal, right? Finally, in 2015, Play Review. It was a seminal moment for us.
Oh, actually, I have something funny to tell you about the word.
Good, let's hear it.
Well, I was at a party with a friend, and my friend was in the Merchant Navy. And another guest came up to us and said, "So what do you do?" And my friend said, "Well, I'm a seaman."
It's funny already.
And then the guest said, "Well, we all were at one point, but what do you do now?"
All right, that's our word for the day. P, thanks for being there. Bye. If you have a word or a phrase and you are curious or confused about its etymology, usage, correctness, send us a message. And we would love to have you on the show and discuss it live with you on the air. The Literary City at Explocity.com or simply TLC at Explocity.com, the Facebook group Bangalore Literary Society or Instagram, Explocity BLR. You can send us a message, slide into our DMs, whatever you like. And if your question is selected, we'll call you. While it's great fun to be educated and be able to discuss words and phrases and their nuances and their meanings, in this year of 2022, Happy New Year, by the way, let's spare a thought for the many children who would love to have the same opportunity to be educated and become thriving, contributing members of society. Many of them simply don't get an education. But the good thing is there are many organizations who strive to bring them the education they deserve. And one of them is the Association for the Physically Disabled, or APD. It's located in Bangalore, and they do wonderful work. For years, they've run a school, bringing education to little children. And as always, they could do with some help. So we ask that you find it in your heart to head to apd-india.org or apd-india.org and make a donation, whatever you like. All the information is there on their website. And as Explocity, we have supported them for many, many years, and we know the wonderful work that they do. And we're going to have so much fun in 2022. To find out what we do, join the Facebook group, Bangalore Literary Society. Doesn't matter if you're not from Bangalore, just join the group. It's going to be fun. Okay, that's our show. I'm Ramjee Chandran. Thank you so much for listening.